Hello, Symposiast. I'm Dr. Angela Puca, Religious Studies PhD and University lecturer, and this is your online resource for the academic study of magic, esotericism, paganism, shamanism, and all things occult. So, I'm really pleased to be here with you because this is the second part of our exploration on Lucifer. If you haven't seen the first part, which is Lucifer from Morning Star to Fallen Angel, I will definitely recommend you guys to catch it up before you watch this one because it gives you the essential historical context on Lucifer's transformation from a Roman astronomical term to a Christian fallen angel. In this episode, we focus on Lucifer's dramatic reinterpretation in modern esoteric thought and practice. Beginning in the 19th century, figures like Helena Blavatsky and Rudolf Steiner revolutionized the understanding of this symbol, proclaiming Lucifer not as a demonic adversary, but as a bringer of spiritual illumination and self awareness. So, we will explore how contemporary Luciferian traditions have developed sophisticated ritual systems, drawing from ceremonial magic, depth psychology, and Western esoteric practices. From the Black meditation to symbolic altar work, from initiatory rituals to transformative practices, these traditions represent a living spiritual current that highlights self knowledge, personal sovereignty, and conscious evolution. So stay tuned as we examined how an ancient light bearer continues to inspire modern spiritual seekers in their quest for illumination beyond orthodox boundaries. But before we dive heads deep, brains deep into our discussion, allow me to remind you that this project of delivering free academic scholarship on all things esoteric can only exist thanks to your support. So if you have the means and want to support my project, I would really appreciate it if you did so by joining my Patreon community. Checking out my services at drangelapuca.com. You find all the links here in the QR codes. Also, you find them in the bio, in the cards, in the info box, everywhere. So I would really appreciate if you consider supporting me on Patreon. I have a fantastic growing community. We have monthly lectures, a book club, a Discord server. There's lots of fun going on there. You can also support me on Coffee via PayPal and checking out my services at drangelapuca.com. This is how this project stays alive. So I really hope that you consider doing so. And now let's crack on with our little lecture for today. So let's look at our modern reinterpretations of Lucifer in a more modern context. The 19th and 20th centuries witnessed significant reinterpretations of Lucifer in esoteric, philosophical, and spiritual contexts that diverged markedly from traditional Christian demonology. These new understandings emerged from broader intellectual currents, including Romanticism, occultism, depth psychology, and various esoteric movements. Rather than representing cosmic evil, these traditions often portrayed Lucifer as a symbol of consciousness, individualism, intellectual illumination, and spiritual evolution. Rudolf Steiner, founder of anthroposophy, developed a complex cosmology in which Lucifer played a crucial role distinct from Christian conceptions. In Steiner's spiritual framework, Lucifer represents one of two cosmic polarities, the other being Ahriman, that influence human development. Unlike the Christian devil, Steiner's Lucifer is not inherently evil, but rather a necessary spiritual force associated with imagination, creativity, and self consciousness, albeit one that can lead to excessive pride and detachment from material reality when not properly balanced. I have two dedicated videos on Rudolf Steiner, by the way, so if you want to dive deeper into Steiner, there are more episodes on the channel. In works such as Lucifer and Ahriman from 1919 and the Spiritual Hierarchies of the Physical World from 1909, Steiner articulated how Luciferic forces contributed to human spiritual evolution by instilling the capacity for freedom and self awareness. According to his esoteric teachings, the Luciferic influence was essential in humanity's development of independent consciousness, though it simultaneously created the possibility for egotism and spiritual pride. Steiner positioned Christ as the balancing force between Luciferic and Ahrimanic extremes. This triadic model, with Lucifer as expansion spiritualization, Ahriman as contraction materialism and Christ as balance, represents a significant departure from dualistic Christian frameworks. Scholarly analysis suggests that Steiner drew from Gnostic traditions, German idealist philosophy, and his own claimed spiritual insights to construct this cosmology. Helena Blavatsky, co-founder of the Theosophical Society, presented one of the most influential reinterpretations of Lucifer in her monumental work The Secret Doctrine from 1888. Blavatsky explicitly sought to rehabilitate the figure of Lucifer, distinguishing between the theological Satan and what she considered the original light-bringing entity. She associated Lucifer with Prometheus of Greek mythology, portraying both as benevolent figures who brought divine knowledge to humanity despite punishment from higher authorities. Blavatsky wrote that Lucifer is divine and terrestrial light, the Holy Ghost and Satan, that they are all at once and at the same time. This radical reinterpretation influenced subsequent esoteric movements by establishing Lucifer as a symbol of human intellectual and spiritual potential rather than as a demonic adversary. This radical reinterpretation influenced subsequent esoteric movements by establishing Lucifer as a symbol of human intellectual and spiritual potential rather than as a demonic adversary. The Theosophical Society even published a journal titled Lucifer from 1887 to 1897, with Blavatsky serving as its first editor. This publication aimed to reclaim the original meaning of the name as light bringer, while challenging orthodox religious interpretations. Now, let's cover some traditions that include and incorporate Lucifer, like, for instance, Luciferianism. Contemporary Luciferianism emerged as a distinct spiritual current during the late 20th century and represents a more formalized approach to Lucifer as a spiritual symbol outside Christian frameworks. Unlike Satanism, with which it is often confused, Luciferianism typically focuses on self development, knowledge, and spiritual enlightenment rather than opposition to Christianity. Modern Luciferian traditions exhibit considerable diversity. Some organizations, such as the Order of Phosphorus, founded by Michael Ford, and the Greater Church of Lucifer, established in 2014, have developed structured philosophies and practices centered on Lucifer as a symbol of enlightenment and apotheosis. These contemporary movements often draw from various historical sources, including Gnosticism, Hermeticism, Neoplatonism, and Western occultism, while adapting them to contemporary spiritual needs. Scholarly analysis suggests that modern Luciferianism operates as a left hand path tradition, which highlights individual spiritual development, antinomianism, which is challenging established moral and religious norms, and the psychological integration of shadow aspects. Unlike traditional religious structures that emphasize conformity to external authority, Luciferian paths typically promote self deification or spiritual individuation. And on this note, I have to remind you that I have an online course on the left hand path on my website. So, in case you guys want to take it and learn more about Luciferianism, Lucifer, and all things left hand path, you're very welcome to sign up. Carl Jung's analytical psychology and subsequent depth psychological approaches have provided another framework for reinterpreting Lucifer as representing archetypal forces within the human psyche. Rather than a literal being, this perspective views Lucifer as symbolizing aspects of the collective unconscious related to illumination, rebellion, and the shadow elements of consciousness. Jung himself wrote extensively about alchemical symbolism, noting parallels between alchemical processes and psychological transformation. In this context, Lucifer like figures, including Prometheus, represent the necessary fiery element in psychological individuation, the capacity to challenge established paradigms and illuminate unconscious content. Post-Jungian scholars have further developed these ideas, suggesting that the Lucifer archetype represents a necessary psychological function for human development, the capacity to question, illuminate, and transform through consciousness. From this perspective, demonizing this function creates psychological imbalances rather than spiritual protection. Contemporary religious studies and cultural history scholarship recognizes these modern reinterpretations as significant developments in Western esotericism and alternative spirituality. The transformation of Lucifer from demonic adversary to spiritual symbol represents a broader cultural shift in approaches to traditional religious narratives. Also, it's interesting to note that these reinterpretations reflect changing attitudes toward authority, individuality, and the nature of spiritual development in post-Enlightenment Western culture. The rehabilitation of Lucifer parallels broader intellectual movements that question traditional hierarchical structures and promote individual spiritual autonomy. Significantly, these modern Luciferian interpretations typically remain distinct from devil worship or black magic as portrayed in popular culture. Academic research indicates that contemporary Luciferians generally reject notions of evil or harm in favor of knowledge, liberation, and personal sovereignty. These diverse reinterpretations illustrate how religious symbols evolve through cultural dialogue, often developing meanings quite different from their original contexts. The transformation of Lucifer from fallen angel to illuminating force reflects broader shifts in Western approaches to spirituality, individual gnosis over institutional authority, and psychological integration over moral dualism. The academic study of these modern Luciferian currents provides important insights into alternative religious movements and their relationship to mainstream traditions, and shows the ongoing reinterpretation of traditional religious symbols in response to changing intellectual and spiritual needs. Contemporary Luciferian spirituality encompasses diverse practical components beyond philosophical concepts, including ritual magic, devotional practices, meditative techniques, and symbolic actions. These practices vary considerably across different Luciferian currents and organizations and reflect the tradition's emphasis on individual interpretation and spiritual autonomy. Unlike more centralized religions, Luciferianism lacks standardized rituals, instead, encouraging practitioners to develop personalized approaches while maintaining certain core principles and symbolic frameworks. Modern Luciferian ritual practices draw from multiple Western esoteric traditions, particularly ceremonial magic, while adapting them to specific Luciferian theological frameworks. These rituals typically serve purposes of invocation, self transformation, and spiritual alignment rather than the coercive summoning portrayed in popular culture. Academic research indicates that contemporary Luciferian ritual structures often synthesize elements from several historical traditions. The ceremonial magic of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn and similar organizations provides technical frameworks for ritual circle construction, directional correspondences, and symbolic tools. From these traditions, Luciferians adapt practices of ritual space creation, banishing procedures, and invocational techniques while modifying their theological context. Enochian magical systems, originally developed by John Dee and Edward Kelly in the 16th century and later elaborated by subsequent occultists, appear in some Luciferian ritual frameworks. These complex systems of angelic communication and cosmic correspondences provide symbolic languages and conceptual structures that certain Luciferian groups incorporate into their practices. Ritual practices often integrate thelemic influences derived from Aleister Crowley's magical system, particularly regarding concepts of true will, magical attainment, and the emphasis on individual spiritual autonomy. The Thelemic formula, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law, resonates with Luciferian emphasis on autonomous spiritual development. Scholarly analysis reveals that Luciferian ritual magic generally emphasizes transformational outcomes rather than materialistic goals. Contemporary practitioners typically describe their ritual work as aimed at consciousness expansion, spiritual evolution, and self deification rather than the acquisition of worldly benefits. Meditative techniques form an important component of contemporary Luciferian spirituality. These practices frequently focus on shadow integration, consciousness expansion, and communion with Luciferian archetypes or energies. There are several common meditative approaches that have been documented. The black flame meditation represents a foundational practice in many Luciferian systems. Practitioners visualize an inner flame symbolizing divine consciousness or potential, often conceptualized as the gift of Lucifer to humanity. This visualization aims to strengthen practitioners' connection to their own divinity and transformative potential. Scholars note that this practice draws partial inspiration from Kundalini concepts in Eastern traditions while adapting them to Western esoteric frameworks. Shadow work meditations involve deliberate engagement with repressed, unconscious, or socially unacceptable aspects of the self. Drawing from Jungian psychology and left and path traditions, these practices aim to integrate rather than suppress shadow material, viewing this integration as essential for spiritual completion and authenticity. Astral practices, including techniques for perceived out of body experiences and interactions with non physical entities, appear in some Luciferian currents. These practices typically aim to facilitate exploration of internal and external spiritual landscapes while developing practitioners' magical capabilities. Contrary to popular misconceptions, contemporary Luciferian traditions often include devotional elements resembling those found in other religious contexts, though with distinct philosophical underpinnings. There are several common devotional approaches. So we have altar constructions and maintenance, which represents a widespread practice among Luciferian practitioners. These altars typically feature symbolic objects including candles, often black and red, images of light-bearing or wisdom-associated deities, mirrors, ritual tools, and natural elements. The altar serves as both a focal point for ritual work and as a symbolic representation of the practitioner's spiritual journey. Invocation practices directed towards Lucifer or associated entities appear in various forms across different Luciferian currents. Unlike worship in traditional religious contexts, these invocations typically aim to align with, embody, or commune with Luciferian consciousness rather than to supplicate or serve an external entity. Some practitioners conceptualize these invocations as communion with archetypal forces, while others approach them as interaction with actual metaphysical entities. Scholarly analysis indicates that Luciferian devotional practices often involve a dialectical understanding of divinity, where the practitioner simultaneously recognizes Lucifer as both external symbol entity and internal potential consciousness. This both and approach distinguishes Luciferian devotion from more dualistic religious frameworks that maintain strict separation between worshipper and deity. Formal initiatory structures exist within many organized Luciferian groups and provide frameworks for progressive spiritual development. These systems typically incorporate ritual experiences designed to facilitate specific transformations in consciousness, magical capability, and self understanding. There are several approaches to Luciferian initiation. The Order of Phosphorus, founded by Michael Ford, utilizes a structured initiatory system drawing from Mesopotamian mythology, Western ceremonial magic, and left and path traditions. This system includes formal degrees with corresponding rituals, knowledge requirements, and practical work aimed at progressive awakening and empowerment. Some Luciferian groups incorporate variations of the Black Mass as an initiatory ritual, though substantially reinterpreted from its historical context. Rather than merely inverting Christian symbolism, contemporary Luciferian adaptations typically aim to liberate the practitioner from religious conditioning while affirming spiritual autonomy. This suggests that these rituals function as psychological breaking points with previous belief systems rather than as simple blasphemy or opposition. Self initiation practices feature prominently in Luciferian traditions and highlight individual authority. These personalized rituals often involve symbolic death and rebirth, confrontation with fears or limitations, and formal declaration of spiritual independence. Scholarly research indicates that many Luciferians consider self initiation equally valid to formal organizational initiation, which shows the tradition's emphasis on individual spiritual authority. Material culture plays a significant role in contemporary Luciferian practice, with specific symbols, artistic representations, and objects serving as focal points for ritual and contemplation. There are several key aspects of Luciferian material culture. We have the sigil of Lucifer, an adaptation of alchemical and magical symbols that appears frequently in contemporary Luciferian contexts. This symbol typically combines representations of Venus, Mercury, and Sulfur, and reflects Lucifer's associations with the morning star, divine intelligence, and transformative fire. Practitioners use this sigil in ritual context as a meditative focus and as a spiritual identifier. Artistic representations of Lucifer have evolved significantly in contemporary Luciferian traditions. Rather than the grotesque demonic portrayals common in medieval Christianity, modern Luciferian art typically depicts Lucifer as a beautiful, androgynous, or noble figure associated with light, wisdom, and liberation. These images are used for both devotional and contemplative purposes within Luciferian practice. The colors black and red feature prominently in Luciferian ritual contexts. Black typically represents the void, potential, hidden knowledge, and the shadow self, while red symbolizes vitality, passion, blood, and transformative fire. Candles, altar cloths, and ritual garments often utilize these colors as primary elements. Specialized magical languages, incantation formulas, and adapted ancient texts appear in various Luciferian magical systems. There are several significant linguistic elements here. We have, for instance, Enochian, which is a purported angelic language that was recorded by John Dee and Edward Kelly in the 16th century, that appears in some Luciferian magical systems. Practitioners utilize Enochian calls or invocations and alphabet characters, often adapting them to Luciferian theological frameworks rather than their original angelic contexts. Adapted prayers and invocations drawn from various historical sources, including Gnostic texts, Mesopotamian literature, and Hermetic writings, feature in contemporary Luciferian ritual. These adaptations typically stress themes of enlightenment, divine fire, and spiritual awakening while downplaying or removing elements inconsistent with Luciferian philosophy. Original incantations specifically designed for Luciferian practice have emerged within various organizations and from individual practitioners. These magical formulas typically utilize symbolic correspondences, rhythmic structures, and symbolic imagery designed to alter consciousness and facilitate magical results. Unlike traditional religious prayers, these incantations often stress co creating with rather than supplicating to spiritual forces. Contemporary Luciferian traditions frequently include practices that focus on the body as a vehicle for spiritual development rather than an impediment to it. Sexual magical practices appear in some Luciferian traditions, typically as means of energy generation, consciousness alteration, or symbolic union of opposing forces. These practices draw partial inspiration from historical traditions, including Tantra and Western sex magical systems, such as those developed in the Ordo Templi Orientis. Consent and agency are generally central values in contemporary Luciferian approaches to sexual magic, so that's also important to keep that in mind. And as for older state of consciousness, techniques for older state of consciousness, including breath work, sensory manipulation, and ritualized movement, feature in various Luciferian currents. These practices aim to shift perception, facilitate magical experiences, and develop practitioners' ability to navigate different states of awareness. Some Luciferian practitioners incorporate martial arts or physical training into their spiritual practice, viewing physical development as an aspect of self deification and the cultivation of personal power. This integration shows that there is an emphasis in Luciferianism on embodied spirituality rather than transcendence of physical existence. Modern Luciferian practices continue to evolve through cross cultural influences, technological adaptations, and individual innovation. There are a few emerging trends in Luciferianism. For instance, we have digital technology that has facilitated new forms of Luciferian practice, including virtual rituals, online initiatory experiences, and digital grimoires, magical textbooks. These developments allow for greater accessibility and community connection while raising questions about the role of physical presence in magical practice. The integration of psychological frameworks, particularly depth psychology and cognitive science, has influenced how some Luciferian practitioners conceptualize and structure their magical work. These approaches show that understanding the psychological mechanisms underlying magical practices enhance rather than diminish the efficacy of magic. Environmental consciousness has also emerged in some Luciferian currents, connecting Lucifer's light bringing aspect with awareness of natural systems and ecological balance. This development represents an evolution beyond more anthropocentric earlier interpretations and shows us broader cultural shifts towards environmental awareness. Academic research on contemporary Luciferian practices show us several important contextual points. Despite sensationalized portrayals in popular media, contemporary Luciferian practices do not typically involve harmful actions toward others or animals. Ethical frameworks within established Luciferian organizations generally highlight personal responsibility, consent, and avoiding unnecessary harm. The diversity of approaches within contemporary Luciferianism makes broad generalizations problematic. Practices vary significantly between organizational contexts, geographical regions, and individual practitioners, and reflect the tradition's emphasis on personal spiritual authority and interpretation. It's also important to distinguish Luciferian magical practices from clinical mental health conditions, noting that practitioners typically maintain clear boundaries between ritual consciousness and everyday awareness. While some practices deliberately alter consciousness, practitioners generally demonstrate the ability to integrate these experiences constructively. So, in conclusion, contemporary Luciferian practices represent a dynamic synthesis of historical Western esoteric traditions, modern psychological insights, and innovative magical approaches. These practices reflect Luciferianism's core emphasis on enlightenment, spiritual autonomy, and self deification, while demonstrating considerable diversity in specific methods and interpretations. The available academic research suggests that rather than representing a monolithic system, Luciferian practice continues to evolve through individual experimentation, cross traditional influence, and adaptation to contemporary context. This evolution reflects the tradition's inherent value of questioning, innovation, and personal authority in spiritual matters, suggesting that Luciferian practices will continue to develop rather than becoming fixed in standardized forms. The ongoing academic study of these practices provides growing insights into how marginalized spiritual traditions operate, adapt, and provide meaning for their practitioners while challenging simplistic characterizations in popular culture and religious discourse. This is it for today's episode, and these are my references. I'm finding that it's more and more difficult to put them in the info box as the bibliography gets bigger and bigger. And also, I thank Andrew Reitenmeyer, who's my research assistant. So you have all the references here, and I will try and put the most relevant ones in the info box as well. So if you watched until this point, congratulations. You are super committed to your learning, and I'm very proud of you. And also, leave me a little devil emoji in the comments, perhaps a smiley one, because as we have seen, Lucifer is a bit of a Prometheus, light-bringing figure in contemporary traditions. And yeah, if you like this project of delivering free academic scholarship on all things esoteric, please, 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 and if you have the means, of course, please consider supporting me on Patreon. Really joining at any tier would help, or sending donations on PayPal, or joining my coffee, or checking out my services at drangelapuka.com. I would also highly recommend that you sign up for my newsletter. It is still on my website. You find everything on my website. So drangelapuka.com. It's the best place to be. So you can also sign up for my newsletter so that you are in contact with me beyond unpredictable social media algorithms. And also I'll send a newsletter usually twice a month with all the updates and pictures and everything that I'm up to, things that I don't normally post on my social media. Or you might not be on all my social medias to begin with, so you might want to be up to date. So yeah, please sign up for my newsletter. It's free and academically fun. And if you like this episode, don't forget to smash the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, activate the notification bells so that you wouldn't write a comment saying, oh, I always miss your live streams. I didn't know you were live. Well, if you activate the notification bell, you will always know when I upload a new episode, even if YouTube decides not to show it in your feeds, or if I go live. And so yeah, just activate the notification bell and you will never miss anything from me. And also subscribe if you haven't already, and please share my videos around so that the symposium can grow. I really need you guys to help me with that, because the algorithm, is not always in my favor. And leave me a comment because I want to know what you thought about this episode. Thank you so very much for being here. I'm really happy that you sticked around up until the end. And I also hope that you stay tuned for all the academic fun. Bye for now.